What's going on, guys? Tyrauku here, and I hope everybody is doing great. Let me know down below how your CVC went. Hopefully you got some really good personal rewards. Hopefully you guys won, and hopefully you're going to be going into this Christmas Eve, Christmas Day weekend feeling great. So I'll be doing a video soon on mine talking about how it went. I did about 1 million points. My clan did about 14 million total. The enemy clan did about 14 million total. So I'll go over all that, kind of how I got my points and so on and so forth. Today, however, I want to talk about something I'm going to call lockdown champions. These champions are going to be essentially champions who have the debuffs that would benefit from Fearsome Presence Mastery. So stun, sleep, freeze, true fear, fear, provoke. A lot of these champions on this list though aren't going to benefit from this because I tried to pick champions who have a 100% chance of applying that debuff, so you wouldn't even have to worry about that. Now all these champions are going to be champions ideally who are going to be accessible for you to get. So it's going to be epic champions, going to be some rares that I found to be viable, to be worthy of putting on this top 10, as well as some legendary champions who are free to play. Now, I'm not going to include Molly. While she could technically, some free to play players may get her since she's in the token trader, majority of players are not. Majority of players are not going to do any unbinding whatsoever. I know I won't be, and unless they send me more life tokens, I will not be buying any of these champions. Well, unless Hegemon's in here. If Hegemon is in here, I will definitely be buying some champions at that point. But either way, guys, let's go ahead and jump into this video. So I'm going to try to do this kind of a quick fire way. We're not going to spend too much time on each one of these champions. So if you guys want to see a video talking more about any one of these champions, definitely let me know and I can do that. But I hopefully going to get the point across, let you guys know which champions maybe you want to build, and then we'll move on to the next one. Now, with this in mind, these champions are going to be, all of these champions are going to be very, very good in Doom Tower. Doom Tower, a huge thing is keeping the waves controlled. So all these champions very viable in Doom Tower. All these champions very viable in Arena 3v3, Classic Arena, whatever it may be. All these champions very viable in Faction Wars as well as Dungeons. Dungeons more so depends on where you're at in the game. If you're mid-game, they're going to be very good. You can focus on keeping these champions alive, especially the ones who do provoke. And then your other champions, you can focus more on damage, focus on speed, focus on other stats because you know that your Umbral Enchantress is keeping everybody locked down, keeping everybody focusing on her, allowing your other champions to do what they're supposed to do good damage, apply good debuffs, so on and so forth. So Umbral Enchantress happens to be the very first one on this list. An amazing champion. She used to be even more fun because you could actually remove this, block active skills, even though it says you can't remove it, resist it, block it, or anything. But it used to be wrong. Well, they fixed that and it is correct now. You can't do any of that. So there is a 5-turn block active skills. It doesn't matter if you're in the arena. If you're in the arena and you have her fully booked and you have a 100% chance of placing a 2-turn provoke, which keep in mind, this is the only champion who can do a 2-turn provoke, who has a 100% chance of doing so, and places an unkillable on herself, absolutely amazing. A big weakness with provoke champions is if you provoke somebody and they're a really hard-hitting A1 ability, because provoke locks everybody down to only use their A1 ability, right? But if they hit you really hard and they kill you, there's nobody doing any provoke, so the enemies all lose the provoke, of course, and then kind of bad luck, nothing happens. But Umbral, she has the unkillable, so she won't die. She'll keep the provoke going on. She'll keep the unkillable. If you make her fast enough, she'll get back around to her turn, 5-turn cooldown, and she can cast it again soon after it's falling off the enemy. So she's a very good champion about keeping the enemies locked down. Her A2 is very good as well. Her A1, she's just a very, very good champion. I've talked about her before, but a very solid champion. If you pulled her recently, definitely worth investing in. She is a void epic, so she may be fewer and far between, but very, very solid and very worth it nonetheless. The next champion, you'll get her at day 270. Used to be a champion you were kind of like, I'm getting Visix, great. I don't even want her. But now she's really good. After the rebalance, Visix has become a lot better. Visix the Unbowed, I believe, not the Unbowed, I believe Unbowed. Her A3, I've seen that on Reddit. Somebody was complaining about how people pronounce her name. So it's Visix the Unbowed, I do believe. Okay, so besides that, her A3 ability attacks all enemies, places provoke debuff for 1 turn, places a shield on this champion equal to 20% of their max HP for 2 turns. This ability is going to be so good because 1, she and Umbral are both void affinity, so no weak hits. The provoke for 1 turn, nice. Get it booked down. It's going to be a 3-turn cooldown. So she's going to provoke, 3-turn cooldown, build her to be tanky, good HP, good defense, good speed, good accuracy. She's going to do very, very well for you. But the other huge benefit about Visix is besides the provoke, which is a 1-turn provoke, she also has a decreased speed in her kit. So she can apply decreased speed to everybody on the enemy's team, allowing her to be in a better spot to lap the enemies and keep that provoke applied as long as possible, right? So 3-turn cooldown provoke isn't that big of a deal whatsoever. she can definitely get back around, have provokes up on all the enemies for majority of the match. Her A1 decreases enemies' turn meter as well. So she's a very good, very good champion now at keeping the enemies kind of under control, at bay, and helping your team survive through whatever type of content it is. Dark Elf Faction Wars, viable. She's viable in so many different areas. I've actually used her recently in Doom Tower quite a bit. So Visix, definitely a good champion. Now, Rockbreaker is the next champion I want to talk about. This dude is somebody who was a crutch for me in Faction Wars. I don't have Trunda. At the time, I didn't have anybody really good, so I had to use him. Basically, what he would do is he would provoke the provoke didn't really matter on the boss. The thing that mattered on the boss was this ability. Basically, when booked, he had a 50% chance of decreasing damage inflicted by 50% each time he's attacked. So if the boss would hit him and he activated this, he was good. He survived. If she hit him and he didn't activate this, it was bad. He died. It's really just one or the other is how it happened every single time. This dude's very, very annoying when it comes to arena, because if that's happening on that boss in Faction Wars, it's going to do the same thing when he provokes enemies in the arena and they attack him. He's going to have a chance of reducing the damage they inflict by 50%. So imagine a champion you're hitting. Well, you can almost imagine that with reaction gear, right? Almost, not quite. Reaction has a little bit less damage, I believe. It mitigates more. But if he's provoking the enemy and they're attacking him and they're dealing 50% less damage, he's going to have a very good chance of surviving. But his provoke is very nice in the sense that though he's an affinity champion, he doesn't actually hit the enemy. So if you didn't know, if you actually attack the enemy and they were, say, magic affinity for Rockbreaker, then he has a chance of weak hitting. If he weak hits, he can't apply any debuffs. So in this case, he's going to place the provoke on all enemies. He's going to have a 75% chance, bookable up to a 100% chance, and also placing a counterattack buff on himself, which synergizes very well with his A1 ability, but definitely a champion who's going to be good in the arena, good for Faction Wars. A champion who's probably on this list, one of the champions who's fallen off for me as far as usefulness, the more and more I progress in my account, but still a very solid champion, especially if you're looking for some good 3v3 champions. Some of the champions on this list may be a little bit better, to be honest, but he is very, very good, especially if you don't have a huge variety of champions and who to use. The next one I want to talk about is Cornelia. Cornelia has a 80% chance, bookable up to 100% chance of placing sleep debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. Also, passive effect, whenever an enemy loses a sleep debuff placed by the skill, has a 50% chance of replacing it with fear debuff for 1 turn. Now, I'm like 99% sure, you guys can let me know if I'm right or wrong. I believe this gets booked up with this ability. I believe this buff and debuff chance applies here as well. I don't know why I wouldn't. So this will go to a 70% chance of replacing with fear. So basically she places sleep on everybody. If that sleep falls off, she has a chance of replacing it with fear. Now fear isn't amazing, but you can't interrupt fear. Like fear is going to be there. It has a chance of activating. And if it does activate, the enemy skips their turn. True fear, if it activates, the enemy's skill that they're going to use gets put on cooldown. So true fear is better. But fear is very, very solid and basically allows Cornelia to essentially have a potential for a 2-turn control ability, right? So she sleeps him for the first turn, she fears him for the second. Very, very solid champion. Definitely gives her a spot on this top 10 lockdown champions that are more accessible. The next champion is Sill of the Drakes. Now, how could you do it? How could you do a list without including Sill of the Drakes on champions who are very good at CC abilities? Making sure I'm not cutting off my green screen here. But her ability, I was hesitant to include her because her chance to apply stun isn't 100%. There's not very many champions who have a very high chance of placing stun, but Sill has an attacks all enemies 2 times. Each hit has a 20% chance of placing stun. This 20% gets booked up to 20, 35% chance. Each hit has a 35% chance. If you take Fearsome Presence as well, it's going to go to a 40% chance with each hit. So she's going to have a very good chance of placing stun. And I definitely think she deserves a spot on this list because of that stun, because of the decreased speed, because of the decreased turn meter on her A1 ability. Sill makes for a very good candidate for the lockdown abilities, plus all the other support that she brings. An amazing champion. And once you get her, 9 out of 10 players will be building her as soon as they get her from the daily login rewards. That 1 out of 10 players who aren't going to be building her when they get her from the daily login rewards are the players who already got her from pulls earlier on. Basically is how it goes. If you have Sill, she's going to be built, more or less. She's an amazing champion. So good with crowd control, so good with support. Just a really well-rounded champion, and super happy that she's a free champion from daily logins. It's very, very nice. The next one we're going to talk about is a rare champion, Gnarlhorn. Gnarlhorn is a champion who I built not too long ago. Spirit Affinity. So remember, he can weak hit, but places. There's no attack, okay? So there's no attack to this ability. Places provoke debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. Places a 30% increased defense buff on this champion. This dude is, well, I thought he was farmable. He's not farmable. I guess he's in the Rosin fusion, right? But this dude is so good, okay? So Gnarlhorn. Provoke on all enemies for 1 turn. This is very similar to Rockbreaker, Vistix, as far as this ability alone. And he gets an increased defense on himself. So he's helping himself survive the enemies who are about to attack him. Very good champion, very worth it for a lot of different areas in the game. I built him up for the HP rooms in Doom Tower, plus good for faction wars, keeping the people under control. Very good for faction wars, very good for, especially if you're trying to progress through faction wars. He's going to be a huge help in keeping those waves controlled, getting to wherever you want and just progressing along through that. Now, his A2, his A3 is very good. His A1, I didn't worry about that too much. These were just the 2 main abilities. Speed, accuracy, and survivability. So attack and defense are the main things that make Gnarlhorn really, really good or not that useful. So make sure his speed, make sure his accuracy, make sure his HP and defense are in good levels. This just 100% chance, so just places it. There's no fearsome presence boost that's going to happen from that ability. Next, let's go talk about Seneschal. Seneschal is a champion who I do believe was included in one of my getting through Bannerlords videos, I believe. Seneschal is such a good champion. However, the big caveat with this guy is he needs books. This dude needs some books. I tried doing Bannerlords Faction Wars 21, I believe, with him unbooked. It was painful. It was very, very painful. I ended up just having to book him. And the thing is he loves to read. He has so many books on this ability specifically. 6 books, right? So 6 books on this ability alone. But I mean 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Books it up to a 100% chance of placing Provoke. So you really need it, but it just takes so much. However, places a counterattack buff on this champion for 2 turns, has a 50% chance of placing Provoke on all enemies for 1 turn. Once again, there's no hit, so there's no weak affinity, no chance of missing the Provoke. As long as your accuracy, speed, and all that kind of stuff is good, you're going to be good to go. You're going to place this, books down to a 4-turn cooldown. This counterattack is nice as well because his A1 places Leech, so it does help with some sustainability. He is a good champion, and if you need him for Bannerlords especially, this is worth booking out. To be honest, this champion, if it wasn't for Faction Wars, I don't know if I would invest into this Provoke because he is so needy as far as the book requirements for him. He is a good champion. He does have some solid use specifically for Faction Wars, but unlike these other champions, I don't think you're going to use him very much when it comes to things like Doom Tower, the Arena. There's just some better options for most people. And while I did invest my books into this guy, and it was a huge help for Bannerlords Faction Wars, outside that, I don't know if I'd use a ton for him. But hey, if you need a good Provoke champion, he can definitely fill that role. He can definitely make sense. And he has a perfect veil and a continuous heal buff on an ally for 2 turns, which also was a huge help for Faction Wars. So he does have some use. He's getting a little bit, I guess, power crept by some other champions. So while he may not be top tier, he's still very good and still has a solid chance to apply that Provoke. So definitely worth being on this list. The next champion is Luria. Now, Luria is a Dark Elf, and she will be benefited by the Fearsome Presence. So attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance, which books up to a 75% chance of placing Freeze for 1 turn. Enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived. So 1, this ability hits pretty hard. 2, it blocks revive, which is very, very nice. And 3, places a freeze, 75% chance of placing the freeze. If you use Fearsome Presence, it goes up to an 80% chance of placing freeze. So while not 100%, it's a high enough percentage chance where I think it's worthy of being on this list, okay? So she has a very good A2 ability. The A3, attacks 1 enemy, removes all buffs, 80% chance of placing block buff, so solid there as well. But this is the main thing we're focusing on. Her base speed is better than a lot of the champions we've seen here. As far as her HP, not great, but she can do some decent damage. Placing that freeze, she's really going to help you lock down the enemy teams wherever you're at. So she's going to be one of those champions, obviously, where you're going to have to keep her alive because she's not as tanky as the champions you're placing Provoke. I mean, she's placing freeze. She don't have to worry about being super tanky. But nonetheless, very solid ability, very good ability here. And Luria is a champion who I've been looking for a little while, and I will be building her as soon as I get her. But a very good champion if you're looking for somebody who does freeze. The next one let's talk about is Archmage Helmet. So Archmage is from the Doom Tower, and he is chilling up here in Bannerlord. So you may have been seeing me scroll right past him earlier and like, yo, why did Ty miss Archmage? Archmage is amazing. And he is. He's absolutely amazing. So Good A3 ability, good A1, good passive, but we're going to be focusing on this ability right here. Attacks one enemy, also attacks all other enemies if the first attack is critical. So build his crit to 100% chance, ideally. The second hit has a 50% chance of placing stun for 1 turn. After attacking, it decreases the turn meters of each enemy without stun by 20%. So the second hit gets boosted up to a 15, 20, 25%. So it's going to go to a 75% chance of placing stun. So while not a 100% chance, it's a very high chance. It can benefit from Fearsome Presence. So you're going to have that plus a turn meter reduction, which is very, very nice, okay? So he's a very, very good champion as far as keeping enemies controlled. And honestly, if you're to the level of getting him, I assume once you get him, you're probably going to be building him very, very quickly because he's just so good in so many different areas and he can do some decent damage. I'm not going to build him for damage. I tried building him for damage. It's decent, but he's just so much better as far as the crowd control, getting him good speed, focusing on the buffs, focusing on the control that he has. He's going to help you progress if you were already stuck somewhere. But if nothing else, Faction Wars, I use him currently in my Faction War team, Doom Tower potentially, and even in the arena. I've used him actually a few times in the arena, and he's worked out very, very well. I mean, he's one of the few champions, maybe even the only champion who does increased speed, increased crit rate, and increased crit damage, okay? So works very, very well, especially bringing him in teams with nuke champions. He helps them get boosted up so much. So an awesome champion, more than deserving of the top 10 lockdown champions who are, I guess, accessible for free-to-play, low spinners, whatever it may be, okay? More accessible champions. And the last but not least is a shock. Now, I debated on including him because of a few things. One, 70% chance of placing freeze, which books up to 70, 80, 90%. If you use Fearsome Presence, it can go to 95%. The issue with him is that on enemies with their attack higher than their defense, he'll place freeze. With enemies whose defense is equal to or higher than their attack, he'll place HP burn. So he's going to be freezing the champions who would be the biggest threat to you, most likely. So those attack-based champions, those high damage-dealing champions, he'll be freezing those. He or she, I don't know. We're not going to get into specifics here, but he'll be burning the champions who are more defensive-based. So very, very good champion. I do use him a lot. He has good other abilities as well, block, debuffs, and strengthen. Very, very good passive ability. This ability is a little bit RNG. So as far as like bringing him into the arena, you have to know some of these champions are going to be frozen, probably just the damage dealer, but most of them are probably going to be burnt, okay? Now, when you're going through dungeon content, same thing. Some of the champions will be frozen, some of the champions will be burnt. Luckily, in Spider Stage 25, he freezes everything. So it's very, very nice in there. This champion, very much worth it, even if not for focusing on this for like progression stuff. A2 ability is very good and the passive ability is very good. A shock is definitely a champion worth building. Definitely a champion who's very good as far as his CC goes. I actually have mine in a stun set. So if he doesn't apply the freeze, he has a chance to apply the stun as well. Either way, guys, though, that wraps up the 10 lockdown champions who I think are worth investing in. Pretty accessible. Hopefully you have a few of them. Let me know if you want to see any more in-depth guide on any of these champions. I'd be more than happy to do it. But with that said, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you have a good holiday season, and I will catch you all in the next video.